exclusive lost footage of waters decreasing and mountains becoming visible. Genesis 8 reads, "The water decreased steadily until the 10th month, and in the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible." Time to once again dial in our nocturnal perception skills to decipher this ancient calendar system. Let's see if we can pick out what the narrative is asking us to observe. First is waters decreasing, and the tops of the mountains becoming visible. As time progresses from the 7th month, 17th day, to this 10th month and the first day, we will observe the blue band of stars slowly sink below the horizon, like a band of celestial waters, decreasing over the course of 72 days. Instead of talking about the arc on this day, the verse draws our attention to the tops or the heads of the mountains. The constellation letters that spelled out the word arc have dropped below the horizon. At the same time, the central red band of stars becomes visible, rising up in the southeast. As we had noticed earlier, the mountains and hills in the region of Ararat have a similar red color during the day as the red band of stars manifests at night. It seems the narrative may be describing the reappearance of the red portion of the Milky Way, this time being described not as water, but rather the tops of the mountains. As this celestial calendar scrolls by to the first day of the 10th month, more hidden details arise, beckoning us to take notice. Nevertheless, it is important to maintain awareness that our attempts to reconstruct something that was hidden and lost are inherently imperfect, and unintended errors may occur as we attempt to decipher the author's intentions. On this particular sunset, let's now draw our attention to Venus, which in Hebrew is called Nogah, meaning bright or light. The name Nogah is fitting. In the last chapter, we saw how the reflection of the sun off of this planet's surface causes it to outshine the brightest of stars. On this date, we find the moon obscures Venus in an eclipse for about 45 minutes. How accurate are these ancient eclipses in this Stellarium software? Oh, that question is a great opportunity to speak some geek. This Stellarium software program has a manual, and within that manual is an appendix, and within that appendix is section F of the appendix. Now, this section F recommends checking this type of eclipse against NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory Ephemeris Index, DE441 and DE431. Let me read from that manual. I know we all love manuals, but I have to read it. Therefore, when using Stellarium for scientific work, like eclipse simulation to illustrate records found in cuneiform tablets, always use some other reference to compare, and of course, specify the program version that you used for your work. Use at least version 0.21.2 of Stellarium. Mr. Cat wanted to know how accurate these ancient eclipses are. Well, you've asked the guy that loves reading manuals, so you're going to hear some of the manual. Appendix F.3 of planetary positions says that Stellarium uses by default the widespread VSOP87 theory to calculate the positions of the planets over time. This is an analytical ephemeris modeled to match the numerical integration run DE200 from NASA JPL. If we continue down to this paragraph, it says the optionally usable JPL DE431 and DE441 deliver planet position strictly for negative 13,000 to plus 17,000 only, and nothing outside, but likely with higher accuracy. Outside this range, positions from VSOP87 will be shown again. So, Mr. Cat, in this study, when we are looking at the date negative 2726 and negative 2725, it is well within this date range. And yes, I have loaded in DE431 and DE441 into Stellarium. Now, Mr. Cat, where were we? Yes, we were looking at an eclipse on this day between the Moon and Venus. Even though Stellarium shows bright objects for Venus and the Moon, with the naked eye observation, these two orbs would both be dim slivers on the horizon. The Moon being obviously dark because it is the first day of the month. This Moon-Venus eclipse is in the Hebrew letter constellation Wav. On this date, the masterful design of this clever astronomical calendar system is yet again drawing our attention to another apparent retrograde motion. This time, it's of Venus. Realize that this narrative is not just a random set of days and months. This narrative begins with a very unique conjunction. This narrative is describing a series of astronomical events. There is no doubt that there is much to be learned from these ancient astronomers. This subsequent segment could be considered a mild spoiler for the next chapter, yet this segment fits well into this present context. The next verse 6 is describing yet another 40-day time gap. 8 verse 6 reads, at the end of 40 days. Something is about to happen that takes 40 days to complete. Why 40 days? Well, let's animate the 40 days and see if you can spot what it is tracking. Starting on this 10th month, the first day, that's May 31st, negative 2725, I will select this Nogah, bright planet. Then count through the 40 days in Stellarium. So this narrative not only marks the start of the bright planet Nogah's apparent retrograde motion, but also the end of the retrograde motion, which happens 40 days later. These upcoming 40 days are describing the time it takes for the planet Nogah to disappear into the sunset and reappear at sunrise. The upcoming verses explain days passing in a series of 40, then 7, then another 7, for a total of 54 days. Starting at the Moon-Venus conjunction and adding 54 days, the Moon orbits twice and returns back to being next to Venus. At the end of 54 days, Mercury enters its third apparent retrograde motion. Now, I'm really skipping chapters just to drop a massive clue bomb on your head. Let us now count how many apparent retrograde motions do Mercury and Venus go through in a year. For the hot planet, Kokav Chama, Mercury, let's count. 1, 2, and 3. Now, how about for the bright planet Nogah, or Venus? We count just 1. Just let those clues rattle around in your gray matter for a bit. For a coding geek, noticing patterns like this in these ancient scrolls tend to nourish my nerd neurons with joy. There is much more to be understood in this, which we'll have to save for later.